So now we are going to look at the main line, and that is the move e5. Well, against e5, black should certainly play the move d5, so counter-attacking this bishop. And again, the main line is bishop to b5. But instead of bishop to b5, let's look what happens when white capture this knight. So e cross f6, d cross c4, and e cross g7, black has to play the move rook to g8. Although it looks a bit scary, but this line is very good for black. The simple reason is black has this wonderful center, and that turns out a big asset for the black perspective. So here there are few moves has been tried. In the first game, my opponent tried the move bishop to h6, but this is a useless move because I played the move queen to f6, immediately attacking the bishop. That means white has to do something with the bishop. So first of all, my opponent tried this queen check, and after I block with the bishop, he responded with the move bishop to g5. Here black can simply capture this pawn, and again there are two moves has been tried. So in the first game, my opponent tried to castle on the king side, but after a very simple d3 attacking the queen and queen to e4, black responded with the move h6, and my opponent find his horror that he cannot move his bishop because the mate is threatened on g2. So white lose a piece, and so is the game. So instead of castling, the another move tried has been is g3, so stopping the mate idea. But now once again black can play the move h6, and after bishop to h4, which has an idea that it's not allowing black to castle on the queen side, but nevertheless black can continue with the move d3 attacking the queen, and after queen to e4, black can go for this wonderful queen trade, that is queen to g6, and this gives black a wonderful game. My opponent continues with the move knight b to d2, but after queen captures and knight recaptures, I played the move bishop to e7, so blocking the file and planning to castle on the queen side. And here my opponent played this blunder move, that is knight to f6 check. Before we go on, I give you a few seconds. Can you identify a winning sequence from the black perspective? I hope you find this one, which is bishop takes f6, and after bishop takes, black can simply play the move bishop to d5, and as far as I can see, white will lose a piece. The more aggressive reply over here is immediately bishop to g5, but against this black can play the move f6, and the whole idea of bishop to g5 is to throw this check, which is queen to e2 check. But here black can simply play queen to e7 and give away the f6 pawn. The game continues like this. So my opponent take this pawn. Now I exchange the queen, and after king recapture, I played the move bishop to g4, so pinning the knight. So my opponent reinforced the knight with knight b to d2. Here I continue with my initiative, so I played the move d3, and after king to f1, I capture the f3 knight, and after white recapture, hit that bishop with king to f7. Here black retrieved the bishop to the h4, and then black regained the pawn with king cross g7. So we have the imbalance in the pawn structure, but if you look at carefully, black has a tremendous pawn sitting on d3, which can be a great asset in this variation. So the game continues like this. So my opponent tried rook to e1, but after rook g to e8, my opponent played the move bishop to g3, which allows me to gain a big advantage. First of all, capture this rook with a check, and after king captures, I give this another check with the rook, and after king to d1, finally my rook has been posted on the 7th rank, that is rook to e2. Look at the activity of that rook compared to the passive rook of the white, and no wonder black has a tremendous advantage. The third obvious move which I want to consider is the castle on the king side, but after this black can simply capture this g pawn, and Again, in this game, my opponent tried the move rook to e1 check, and after bishop to e6, he played the move bishop to f4. So in a way, white is trying to develop his pieces. Here I played the move queen to d7. Now my opponent played a very cunning move, that is bishop to g4. So he wants to stop me to castle on the queen side. But now I can respond with the move d3, so gaining space on the queen side. And after knight b to d2, I drop my bishop back to the e7. So blocking the file and ready to castle on the queen side. So my opponent tried the move bishop takes e7, and after queen takes e7, he thought that he gained a valuable pawn after knight takes e4. Of course, black deliberately sacrificed a pawn to get his king to a safety, and that's why after knight takes c4, black castle on the queen side, and the game continues like knight to e4. Afterwards, black responded with the move queen to d6. Here my opponent exchanged one knight, so he captured my knight on the c6, and after I recapture, he played the move rook to e3. But now you'll see the amazing potential of that vital pass pawn. So here I played the move d2. Please note that knight cannot capture this pawn because at the end there is a mate on g2. So my opponent has to desperately try the move g3, but that creates the another problem, that is black can play the move bishop to g4. So pinning that knight and asking white to find a good move. Well, in the game my opponent, after long thinking, come out with this only move, that is the move h3. But after very simple bishop captures knight and rook captures bishop, black can play the move rook to e8. And as far as I can see, the game is almost lost. The final move played was rook to e3, but now the task become very easy for black because black can simply capture this rook, and after white recapture, black will give this check, and white queen will not survive longer. So this analysis gives you enough confidence to meet the move e cross f6. So let's look at the main line, that is bishop to b5. So instead of e cross f6, at this point the main line is bishop to b5. Here black should continue with the move knight to e4, allowing white to regain his pawn, so c cross d4. But afterwards black will play the move bishop to b6, and in fact this is the starting position of the main line. Now as you can see, I have highlighted by the arrows, black is threatening to play the move bishop to g4, which will make the d4 pawn weaker. So white has to reinforce the d4 pawn with the move bishop to e3, and now black will castle on the king side. And after white castle on the queen side, please remember this move which give you a slight advantage, and that is the move f5. And here I have 3 games for you. So in the first game my opponent tried e cross f6 and I recaptured with the knight, and now my opponent played the move queen to c2. So here I responded with the move queen to d6. Afterwards white has tried 2 knight moves. So in the first game my opponent tried knight b to d2, but then black should continue with the move bishop to d7, and after bishop captures, queen captures and bishop captures, black has this wonderful bishop pair, and white has a problem because white has an isolated pawn. In another game my opponent tried knight to c3 at this point, and that is more natural move, but that allows black to get a huge advantage. So here black should play the move knight to g4, which has a very cunning idea that black wants to capture this knight and then mate the white on h2. And to illustrate how dangerous this is, let me show you one game which can be a very lethal. So at this point my opponent tried the move h3, but now I capture this knight with the rook, and white cannot capture this rook because his king will be mated on h2. So white has to capture this knight. Afterwards black has this fantastic shot knight takes d4, attacking the white queen. So that means white response is pretty much forced. So white has to take this knight, now black will capture this bishop, and it turns out that black will remain a pawn up in this situation. Funny enough that my opponent was 2000 plus and he didn't understand how dangerous this is, and he decided to capture this rook, which allows me to mate him instantly. So I played the move queen to g3 check, and please note this f2 pawn is pinned right now, so white has to forcefully go to the h1. Afterwards queen will capture the f3 pawn. I'll give you an exercise for you. There is a mate in 9, so pause the video and find out checkmate in 9 moves. Okay, so I'm showing you right now. After king to g1, queen captures g4 check, and after king to h2, queen to f5 check. White king dance will continue with the move king to g2, but now black has a fantastic shot, which is bishop to h3 check, and that will finish the game outright, because white has to forcefully capture this bishop. Afterwards queen to f3 check, king to h2, and bishop to e5 check will leads to a very quick mate. So let me go through these moves very quickly. King to g1, queen to g4 check, king to h1, queen to h3 check, and final moves are king to g1 and queen to h2 checkmate. In another game, my opponent tried the move bishop takes c6, and after black recapture, my opponent played the move g3. As you can see, I have highlighted by the arrows, black is threatening to play the move f4. So he played the move g3, and he thought that, well, I'm stopping the f4, but can you guess? Yep, black will play the move f4. And the funny thing is, white cannot capture with the bishop, because if white capture with the bishop, then white will lose a piece after very simple looking the move g5. If bishop drop backs now, then bishop to g4 will nab a piece. So at this point, white has to forcefully capture with the g pawn, so g cross f4, but now black can pin that knight with the move bishop to g4, and this is a very awkward move to meet, because the normal looking move looks like knight b to d2, but it turns out a big mistake, because now black can capture this knight with his own knight, and now queen cannot recapture that knight, and if bishop captures knight, then white will lose a vital pawn on d4. So that is all you need to know in the Scotch Gambit main line. It's time to look at the side variations.